My best friend slept with my roommate, who's about to get married. I couldn't keep this secret, so I made the choice to tell the fiancé. Living with Alex, my roommate, who was getting ready for his wedding, and hanging out with Ellie, my best friend, used to be the highlight of my day. I'm 26, pretty laid back, and I've always liked to keep things simple. Alex, at 28, seemed to have his whole life figured out, especially with his wedding coming up soon. He and his fiancée, Sarah, seemed perfect for each other, like something out of a romantic movie. Ellie has been my best friend since college, and she's always been full of life, always laughing and brightening up the room. We've always been super close, like siblings. She'd come over to our apartment all the time, and whenever she did, the place felt more alive. But then things started to change. Ellie and Alex started spending more time together, and they were getting closer. Too close, honestly. At first, I brushed it off. Friends get close sometimes, right? But then it all hit me like a ton of bricks one evening. The apartment was quiet, but the city outside was buzzing like usual, totally unaware of what was happening inside. I came home earlier than expected and found Ellie and Alex wrapped around each other in a way that left no doubt. They quickly pulled apart, their faces flushed with guilt. But it was too late. The damage was done. That moment is burned into my memory, a constant reminder of their betrayal. It was obvious they had feelings for each other, and those feelings had crossed a line. Since I found them like that, my world has felt completely upside down. I've been struggling with where my loyalty should lie. On one hand, Alex is about to get married, and on the other, Ellie has always been like family to me. The apartment, which used to be full of laughter, late-night pizza runs, and inside jokes, has now become this heavy, silent space, like all the warmth and life has drained out of it. Conversations turned into whispers whenever I walked into the room, and the air always felt heavy, thick with secrets. I started noticing the little things, how they'd stop talking the moment I appeared, or how Ellie's visits became more calculated, always planned for when I'd be out. My chest would tighten whenever I thought about it, and I couldn't shake the unease. At first, I decided to keep it all bottled up. I didn't want to be the one to drop a bomb on everyone's lives. I thought that if I just ignored it long enough, maybe things would go back to normal. I didn't want to be the person responsible for shattering anyone's happiness, so I put on a fake smile and acted like everything was fine. For 3 months, I lived in this bubble of hope and fear, hoping that Alex and Ellie would come to their senses and realize their mistake, and terrified of what would happen if Sarah, Alex's fiancée, found out. It felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to maintain my balance while pretending I was okay with everything. Every day became a struggle to act normal around them. I started avoiding any conversation that could even hint at relationships or love, steering clear of anything that might lead back to the secret I was keeping. It felt like I was living in a completely different world, like an outsider watching them from the sidelines. I pulled away, spending more and more time by myself, trying to avoid going home. I even developed a habit of warning them before I got back, texting or calling ahead. "Hey, I'll be home in 10 minutes, just to make sure I wouldn't walk in on another painful moment. But even with those warnings, it kept happening. Every time I saw them getting too close, it hit me like a punch in the stomach. I started to dread going home. The apartment, which had once been my place to unwind and feel at peace, now felt like the last place I wanted to be. So I began staying out as much as I could. Coffee shops, the library, wandering around town. I did whatever I could to stay busy and away from the apartment. It felt like I was trying to escape my own life, avoiding everything that reminded me of how much things had changed and how uncomfortable I felt in my own space. I was stuck in this impossible situation, my best friend and my roommate, who was about to get married, sneaking around behind everyone's back. I didn't know how to fix it or if it could even be fixed. All I knew was that the longer it went on, the harder it became to live with the weight of it all. I kept their secret for 3 months, trying my best to ignore it, hoping it would somehow fade away. But the more I tried to push it down, the more it gnawed at me. Sarah, Alex's fiancée, was completely in the dark, and the longer I kept quiet, the more unfair it felt to her. The weight of knowing about Ellie and Alex was becoming unbearable. It wasn't just about staying loyal to Alex anymore. It was about doing what felt right. I realized that staying silent wasn't just affecting me. It was affecting everyone. Sarah deserved the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Telling Sarah about Alex and Ellie was, without a doubt, one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world, knowing that one conversation could unravel so much. But after months of living with the secret, watching how it twisted everything in my life, I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. No matter how much I wished things could somehow fix themselves, it was clear that they wouldn't. Sarah needed to know what was going on. She had a right to the truth. 3 months later, I finally decided it was time to talk to Sarah. I chose to meet her in a neutral place, somewhere public but calm enough for the conversation we needed to have. I picked a small coffee shop in the park, hoping the quiet surroundings might soften the blow of what I was about to say. I remember how nervous I was as I texted her, trying to sound casual while every word weighed heavy with the knowledge of what I was about to reveal. The day we met, I arrived early, my stomach in knots. As I sat there waiting, I kept going over how I was going to tell her. No matter how many times I rehearsed it in my head, it never seemed to sound right. How do you tell someone that their entire world isn't what they think it is? When Sarah arrived, she greeted me with a bright smile, totally unaware of the news that was about to hit her. Seeing her so happy made what I was about to do even harder. I started with small talk, trying to ease into the conversation. But there's no easy way to break news like that. Eventually, I had to just come out with it. I told her there was something serious I needed to talk to her about. Something about Alex. I made sure she knew that it wasn't easy for me to tell her, but I believed she had the right to know. Then, with my heart pounding in my chest, I told her everything. I explained to Sarah how, over the past few months, Alex and Ellie had become too close, in a way that wasn't right for two people who were supposed to be just friends, especially when one of them was about to get married. I told her about the day I found them and how I had struggled with whether to tell her or not. I made it clear that my intention wasn't to hurt her but to be honest, because I believed she had a right to know the truth. As I spoke, I watched Sarah's expression shift, from confusion to shock, and then to something harder to read. Hurt, maybe, or betrayal. Her face seemed to show a combination of both. She asked a few shaky questions, her voice trembling, and I answered as truthfully as I could, giving her the details she was looking for. It was painful to watch her process the information, seeing the reality sink in. After I told her, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I had finally let go of the secret that had been eating away at me, and dread because of what it meant for her, for Alex, and for Ellie. I told Sarah I'd support her no matter what she decided to do about her future with Alex, offering whatever I could. She was clearly devastated, and I felt awful. But part of me knew it was better that she heard it from me than from someone else. Or worse, after the wedding. Walking away from that conversation felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. I knew nothing would be the same after that. But I also knew I had done what I thought was right. It was a decision that weighed heavily on me, but my conscience was clear. The days that followed were tense, like walking through a minefield. Sarah confronted Alex, and from what I heard, the fallout was brutal. I wasn't there, but Alex made sure I knew he blamed me for everything. He came home that night, and the look on his face was like a storm ready to break. We had it out. "How could you?" he kept repeating over and over, like a broken record. I tried to explain my side, to make him understand that I couldn't just sit back and watch him make such a huge mistake. But Alex wasn't having any of it. To him, I had committed the ultimate betrayal. Ellie, too, was torn. She was both angry and heartbroken. She felt like I had betrayed their trust by not keeping their secret. Our friendship, once unshakable, began to show cracks. She said she understood why I did it but wished I hadn't. From that point on, our conversations were awkward, filled with tension and long silences. Everything between us became strained, as if the bond we'd had for so long was slowly unraveling, thread by thread. It became painfully clear that things would never go back to the way they were. The atmosphere in the apartment turned cold, thick with unspoken resentment. Alex and I barely exchanged words, and when we did, it was strictly out of necessity. It felt like I was living with a stranger, not the guy who had once been my best friend. Ellie stopped coming over entirely, and our group of friends, once inseparable, started picking up on the tension. Sides were taken, And before I knew it, I was the one standing on the outside. It felt like high school all over again, but this time it was lonelier. I started avoiding the apartment, staying late at work, wandering the city aimlessly, or sitting in parks just to avoid going home. The place that had been filled with so many good memories now felt more like a prison. The worst part was the isolation. Friends I thought I could count on began to drift away, unsure of how to navigate the fallout. The emotional toll was heavy, and I found myself battling guilt on a daily basis. I kept wondering if I had made the right decision. Sleepless nights became the norm as I replayed everything in my head, questioning not only my actions, but my entire judgment. Had I really done the right thing, or had I just torn relationships apart for the sake of my own conscience? Eventually, the situation at the apartment became unbearable. Alex made it clear that he couldn't live with me anymore. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. I knew it was time to go. The search for a new place was swift. I just wanted to get out. Moving out felt like both a relief and a defeat. It was as if I was running away, but I also knew staying wasn't an option. The day I left, the apartment was silent. Alex didn't help me pack, and there were no goodbyes exchanged. It was a quiet, almost hollow end to a chapter of my life I had once thought would last so much longer. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued. Sarah called off the wedding, even though she never blamed me. Our conversations carried the weight of everything that had happened. There was sadness in every exchange, a lingering grief over the future that had been torn apart. As for Alex and me, we lost touch entirely. The bond we had once shared, that brotherhood, became another casualty of the truth. Ellie and I tried to salvage what we could of our friendship, but it was like trying to glue together a broken vase. We could put the pieces back together, but it would never be the same. It would never hold the same trust or closeness again. Looking back, I still wonder if things could have turned out differently if I had just stayed silent. But deep down, I know I couldn't have lived with myself if I had. The price of honesty was steep, and I paid for it in friendships, heartache, and loneliness. But I know now, even with all the loss, that it was the only way forward. But lying to myself and to everyone else would have cost me even more. In the end, I learned that some truths are heavy, but carrying lies is heavier still. After the storm of revelations in the shifting sands of lost friendships, the days slowly began to brighten. The healing wasn't immediate. It was more like the gradual bloom of spring after a harsh winter, slow and uncertain but full of promise. I moved into a new apartment, a small but bright space that felt like a fresh start. In the solitude of my new surroundings, I found peace and, unexpectedly, a sense of freedom that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The void left by old friendships slowly made room for new ones. I threw myself into hobbies I had long neglected, joined a local soccer team, and even picked up guitar lessons. These activities brought me into new social circles I wouldn't have encountered otherwise. Through these connections, I met people who offered fresh perspectives and brought laughter back into my life. And over time, even the ghosts of Ellie and Alex began to fade as time worked its quiet magic. Ellie was the first to reach out, sending a tentative text that opened the door to reconciliation. Our friendship, once fractured, began to heal, not in the way it once was, but into something new and more mature. We acknowledged the past but chose to focus on the future, supporting each other as we always had, but with the understanding that we had both grown. Alex took longer, but eventually a chance encounter at a mutual friend's wedding brought us back into each other's orbit. There was an initial awkwardness, but it eventually gave way to an honest conversation where apologies were exchanged and forgiveness was found. It was a reminder that while friendships can fracture under the weight of secrets, they can also be rebuilt, stronger in the places where they were once broken. As for my career, it took an unexpected turn when I was offered a position at a startup. The work was challenging but rewarding, and it came with the added perk of travel. I found myself seeing parts of the world I had only ever dreamed about. On one of these trips, I met Maya, a fellow traveler with a passion for adventure and a warmth that drew me in from the start. Our connection was instant. What began as a shared journey through foreign lands blossomed into the partnership I had always longed for, but never quite found. Years down the road, as I look back on that tumultuous period in my life, I no longer see it as a time of loss. Instead, I view it as a crucible that reshaped my character, and paved the way for my future. Ellie, Alex, and I, though forever changed, managed to coexist in each other's lives, a testament to the endurance of true friendship. And now with Maya by my side, building a life and exploring the world together, I am reminded that the hardest roads often lead to the most beautiful destinations. Happiness, I've learned, isn't about the absence of pain or conflict. It's about the resilience to move through it and find joy on the other side. My story, once marred by betrayal and heartache, has transformed into a narrative of growth, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Thank you for watching this video. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing. I post stories like this on the regular. See you on the next one.